pensamiento, acción. Entrevistas realizadas en el marco del 19º Congreso Internacional de la Asociación Filosófica de México en la Universidad Autónoma de Aguascalientes. En esta ocasión, el Dr. Gereon Kopf, profesor en Luther College, es entrevistado por el maestro Pavel Zavala del Departamento de Filosofía de la UAA. Gracias por acompañarnos.
Buen día, les agradecemos una vez más su amable atención. El día de hoy estamos con el profesor Gereon Kopf. Good day. Today we have an interview with Professor Gereon Kopf. He's a professor in Luther College and in the University of Iceland. Él es profesor en el Colegio de Lutero en Iowa y en la Universidad de Islandia. Sus principales líneas de estudio es Filosofía de la Religión y Culturas Orientales. Good day, sir. Good day, Professor. So we are going to make you some questions about philosophy and about the Philosophy Congress we have here. So for a start, would the world be the same without philosophy?
Firstly, thank you very much for having me and for that conversation, for that opportunity. And that's a big question. And of course, as a philosopher, I think that philosophy is important. That means that philosophy has made a lot of contribution to the world. And from that follows that if we didn't have philosophy, then the world would look differently. But I don't think that actually only applies to philosophy. I think that a lot of different projects and enterprises do contribute to the world, and therefore, if they weren't there, then the world would be a different place. But having said so, I think that philosophy has a special contribution to make to the world.
What kind of contributions?
The philosophy, the way we define it is, we can define it in multiple ways. In one way is it's the reflected life. It's a way of thinking about human existence. It's thinking about our lives, thinking about our place in the world, in society. And so in the widest sense, philosophy is self-reflection and reflection on the world. So reflection on the self and our place in the world. But in a different sense, philosophy is actually, as an academic discipline, it's also the discipline of making rational arguments. It's so we're looking at how to perceive the world. We're looking at how we construct our knowledge. We're looking at how we make arguments, and we're looking at if our views are consistent or inconsistent. And so, again, it helps us think critically about the world.
Thank you. And does philosophy change the world?
Yeah, I think that once we reflect on the world, once we understand the world, we realize how we perceive the world, why we perceive the world the way we perceive it, and then through ethical reflections of how that affects of our behavior. And obviously there's a very important contribution way that changes the world as ethical reflection, thinking about what behavior is appropriate and inappropriate. I think that's a very important part of changing the world.
Okay, do you think today philosophy is in danger?
That is a question that has been often asked, especially in the university culture. It's not only philosophy, it's also humanities in general. And the reason why we ask that question is that within the political structure of university, there's more priority given to the sciences and to disciplines that are deemed more effective, more practical. So in that say, there is a lot of pressure right now institutionally, but also financially on humanities and philosophy in particular. We've talked earlier, and you said that there's this impression that philosophies are weird people, are secluded, do their own little thing in universities. So we have the picture of the ivory tower, and for some reason that picture is still very strong. And so the way then philosophy is challenged is that we are less people studying philosophy, and also there is less of a financial commitment of university institutions to support philosophy.
What can we do as philosophers to change this image of the philosophy, this ivory tower?
I mean, to change the image of the Eiffel Tower, we just have to leave the tower, right? So we have to I don't want to say go out in the world, but we have to engage. We have to engage other disciplines. And that's what I really like about a place like Luther College. It's a liberal arts institution. So interdisciplinarity is really important to us. So actually I am asked at least once a year to teach courses with people in other departments. So I've taught with people in physics, I've taught with people in history, I've taught with people in communication studies, with people in theater. And so that's the first step, is sort of seeing how disciplines, how philosophy can be important for physics, how physics can be important for philosophy. The second step then is to show how that also philosophy is important culturally, in terms of I mean, the question we discuss in philosophy, like self, knowledge, morality, is something that's very crucial to our lives. We look at how humans act, we look at social structures, and I think if we can communicate that this is not just something we do in our little technical discourses, I think then we can show that there's actually a real important social importance to philosophy.
Okay. Can philosophy help to solve the problems humanity faces in present days? I mean, like climate change, populism, fascism, intolerance.
I think so. I think so, since philosophy analyzes structures of knowledge, and since, especially when you talk about social interaction, the way we interact with people has a lot to do and is conditioned by the way we perceive them. So if we become self-aware of our structures of knowledge, of why we believe what we believe, why we have certain beliefs about certain groups of people, and if we can critically understand them and also correct them in a sense that they become more appropriate, I think that can really help social interaction. I just gave a paper on the ecological self, so I think that's where the connection then is with climate change. Again, it's if philosophy thinks about humans and our place in the world, then the environment plays part of it. And what philosophy can deal with is, again, it creates self-awareness. Philosophy analyzes how we perceive and conceive of reality, can sort of question our motivations of and analyze the rhetoric that we use to convince people about our policies. In that sense, I think philosophy has an important contribution to make also to those big political and environmental issues.
Okay, which is philosophy's most important and urgent task nowadays?
I think it's the most important is always, it's difficult because it depends on different people are in different contexts dealing with different issues. So every person thinks that the issue they are confronting is the most important issue. But I think intercultural communication is really important. Actually understanding other people's, understanding where other people are coming from. And to do that, we have to learn not only about their economic structures, we also have to learn about their culture and their tradition. That's again where philosophy plays an important role. And so I think that is important. It's for us to communicate with each other as human beings and understand the effect we have on the environment. Those are the two key issues right now.
So communication is the main task.
Communication, intercultural communication, it's understanding where other people are coming from. I mean, I would say it's social justice is an important task, but that's part of that. When we grow up, we learn one culture, we can learn one language, we internalize one way of thinking, but then to realize that my way of thinking is not the only one, that there are others, that we can be in dialogue and that they can learn from us, I can learn from them, right? And I think this is an important task. I call it communication. What I mean is understanding oneself and the other person, and then in that dialogue of understanding to try to create the world a better place.
Okay. I know you study religion, right? So why is the study of religions or philosophy of religion important for the contemporary society? Why it's important to understand religion today?
I mean, when you talk about religion today, it's interesting. A lot of people say that religion is sort of being pushed out of the sort of the social sphere, but on the other side is actually pushing back in. If you look at a lot of public discourses, political, cultural, even economic, there's a lot of religious rhetoric being used. I took a class, students to Japan, to look at religious and corporate cultures, and was actually interested in that there was a lot of similarities, that some corporations actually use religious rhetoric in their management strategies. So, and if you look around the world, there's a lot of religious rhetoric again showing up in political discourses. So I think from that it's really important. So it's but also it's really important because religion shaped our cultures. So you can't understand if you can't understand a person's background without sort of the larger cultural, intellectual, and religious tradition of where they're coming from. The third reason why I think it's important is when we say religion, a lot of us mean religious institutions, but actually the religious idea is to see ourselves on the horizon of the whole cosmos, the totality of our existence. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind. It's not only focus on one specific economic problem or one specific psychological problem or one specific political problem, to see the whole horizon. And that's actually what religion at its best does, is to give to put our existence in the horizons of the totality of everything that exists.
Do you think politicians, present politicians, are like messiahs? Do they use this messianic rhetoric to gain power?
I'm looking at different politicians' speeches throughout the world. There are some that emphasize that messianic theme more than others, and it seems to also be working to galvanize support, right? And some of it may be that people feel that there's a need, if you want to use the religious term, for salvation, but just that there are problems they're struggling with and are overwhelmed by, so they're looking for someone who provides solution. And personally, I think politicians, the role of politics is to find practical solution, and I'm not really sure that the messianic rhetoric helps politics the way it's supposed to work.
Do you think which is most dangerous to the humanity? Right messianism? How can I say it? The politicians from right, the politicians from left, every one of them use messianic rhetoric. But which one is most dangerous to the world, to the politics? Right, conservatism, or left, liberalism?
Since I'm a Buddhist scholar, a scholar of Buddhist philosophy, I want to give you a Buddhist answer to that.
Right.
I think that the most danger is if people are convinced that they are absolutely right. And even if they have good intentions, even if they have good ideology, then I think that conviction that I'm right and you're wrong is that which closes any communication, and which closes the doors on progress and on compassion. All right. There's actually a very interesting anime series that came out of Japan. It's extremely popular in the United States. I don't know if it's been translated, subbed into Spanish. It's called Death Note. In Death Note,
yes. It is very popular here.
So the Death Note, there's a person who gets the power to kill at will, right? And he uses it, he wants to use it to create a perfect world. But he ends up destroying everything around him, right? And I think that is I think in sort of a good image of what I think is the problem, is sort of convinced that my way is right, and if just everyone followed me, the world would be a better place, right? Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Zen master who is popular, he lives in France now, said the one thing, the most problematic attitude is absolutism, to convince that I'm right. And a lot of Buddhist rhetoric is actually aims at sort of showing that oneself is not as important as we think we are, and also showing that our views may not be absolutely true. So that I think that's the destabilizing of the tendency to put oneself first, to also the tendency to think that I'm right and everyone who disagrees is wrong. This is what Buddhism says creates suffering, and so the solution would be to destabilize those beliefs.
Okay. Is the Buddhist thinking, now you are talking about Buddhism, is the Buddhist thinking compatible with the contemporary Western way of life? Can we be Buddhist and also be from a Western society?
This question came a lot up in the 60s and 70s. D.T. Suzuki, when he popularized Zen Buddhism in the Anglophone world, for a long time was skeptical that people in the United States and the people in the Americas and in Europe could embrace Buddhism. Actually, he changed his mind when he met a Christian mystic, Thomas Merton, and so one answer to your question would be, I mean, there are already a lot of Buddhists in the Americas and in Europe, so it is possible. But I also think sort of the dichotomizing of an Eastern thinking versus a Western thinking is very unhelpful, because obviously there are different philosophies, right? But there are also differences within the so-called West, and there are also differences within the so-called East. And people who grew up in India, China, and Japan, and Korea, and Tibet, and Sri Lanka, and other Buddhist countries who say Buddhism is not for me. And there are people who grew up in Europe or the Americas and say Christianity is not for me. So I think that while Buddhism helped shape certain cultures, nowadays we are in a global cultures where I think the movement of tradition is across geographical boundaries.
I have a very important question for you.
Okay.
Is Buddhism a religion or a philosophy?
It's both, and it's more. It's a tradition. It's a tradition.
Okay.
There are religious institutions within the Buddhist tradition. There are philosophies within the Buddhist traditions. There's Buddhist culture, right? So there's a lot of sort of different discursive forms or different institutions within what we call Buddhism. So it's very interesting. Sort of traditions are very open-ended. It's really hard actually to figure out what their boundaries are, especially when they start merging with other traditions. And when Buddhism comes to China, it's influenced by Taoism and Confucianism. Buddhism comes to Europe and to the Americas, and it's influenced by Christianity, right? So the same thing. Many people say that modernity and European Enlightenment sort of is the hallmark of Western thinking, of so-called Western thinking. But people like Voltaire and Leibniz were influenced by Confucianism. Right? So we have to see that actually there's a lot of communication between what we call cultures, and that they are not discrete sort of entities.
I want to make you one last question.
Okay.
Why only multiculturalism can make us humans? What happens with all the persons, with all the people who cannot pay a voyage to another country? Are not they humans? What happens with them?
I'm not sure where the question is coming from. I think that multiculturalism is very important, but for me, multiculturalism is not that you have to go to different cultures. Right. So multiculturalism is usually seen as many different cultures in the world, or many different cultures in one country. In Germany, we talk about multikulti, which means multicultural society. But I think multiculturalism can also be something internal, that people who have been influenced by different cultures, then themselves draw from different traditions and become multicultural as a person, right? But I don't actually think that means that you have to be in touch with other cultures. what it basically means is that you see, for me, the basis of multiculturalism is the insight that being human is not limited to one culture. Right? Right. So, but it doesn't mean that you have to travel to have that attitude. You just have to be open about the possibility that other cultures, even those you've never met, may be as valid as yours. So this is for me the door to multiculturalism. It's not that you have a checklist, okay, I have to go to China, I have to go to South Africa. And so it's just the openness to relate to human beings as human beings, regardless of their cultural background, and to be open to relate to other people. Right? And I mean, nowadays, you said Death Note is popular in Mexico. You can go in my small town where I live. You can eat sushi, right? So it's actually, you don't have to travel anymore to encounter other cultures. And with the internet, especially, you can go online. You can see things from different cultures. So I don't think it's travel as much as I like travel. I don't think it's a condition. I think it's a mental attitude, is to be open and see the human in cultures, and to emphasize that over cultural differences.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank you for this interview, for your kindness, and I want to invite you to continue with this Congress of Philosophy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you to you.